Okay, we're going to talk about solenoids. So solenoids are essentially the electric device that connects your controller to your drip irrigation system. So we're getting an electric signal either via a wire or a radio. It's going to this solenoid, it's opening and closing the solenoid, and the solenoid is connected to a valve. And then that valve's opening and closing to let water either start passing through or stop passing through a particular valve or a zone. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about the different kinds of solenoids. These are the primary ones we're using. These are called aquatives. It's a netafim solenoid. You'll notice there's two different colors here. The black knob is a DC latching, meaning it's a DC power that it's a DC latching solenoid. The controller sends it a burst of DC power, and then it goes into its position, and it latches in that position. And then when it needs to go the other direction, it sends another burst of power with the reverse polarity. So you'll notice on this one, it's got a white and a black wire. So it gets polarity in one direction to open, it gets polarity in the opposite direction to close. So during the valve operation, there's no electricity being sent to the solenoid. It's latching open and it's latching close. The reason we use these is they use a very small amount of power. This can be run off of a battery or a small solar panel. So it's a very energy efficient solenoid that we'll use in the field when we're connected to an RTU or to a battery. This is this is an AC solenoid. It uses 24 volt AC power, and you'll notice that the wires are both black on there. So basically it's getting 24 volt continuous power in the open position. When the power leaves, then it closes. So operated differently than the DC latching. We also have a few systems out that will have this cylinder style DeRote solenoid. A lot of times on your backflush filters, depending on what type of backflush filter you have, you might have the small style solenoid. Okay, I want to go into just a little bit on how these solenoids work. So inside, on the top here, we have an open, close, auto position. And that's the same on both the AC and the DC latching. When it's in the auto position, that means the controller can open and close it. Okay, so that's the position it needs to be in anytime you're irrigating in normal conditions. If you want to force the valve open, you flip it to the open position. Now when you flip it to the open position, that's just like the controller sending it a signal telling it to open, and the controller cannot close it. So if it's in the open position, that valve is going to be on all the time. On the same concept, if you go to the closed position, that's going to force the valve closed, and the controller cannot open it. So understand that it's very important if you want your system to be operating in the auto position with the controller, these need to be in the auto position here on these solenoids, and that's the same on the AC and the DC latching. They both work the same way. What happens on the bottom side here is it has little knobs that basically go in and out as you open and close it. So when I rotate that knob from open to close, it's changing which port is being open and closed and which direction the water flow is going to go. Okay, one thing to keep in mind, if you ever have to service one of these solenoids or do some troubleshooting with them, there are different ports on the bottom here that are labeled COM, so command, and then A and B. So it's very important that if you have to swap one of these out or change them for any reason or do any service work, that you get them back the same way that it was. So if we unbolt, for example, this solenoid, and right now the command is underneath. And if I take the two screws out and I flip this body around and I go like this, that completely changes how the solenoid works. The direction of how this is mounted is very important with how the solenoid is going to operate. We have a number of diagram tools to help troubleshoot these. There's this handbook here, it's called the connection diagrams. We also have an app on the phone that will get you a link to of how to electronically access these diagrams. But these diagrams essentially show what the flow is for the different positions. So if you want to dig into how these valves operate or trying to troubleshoot something, these diagrams are super helpful to understand how the solenoids work. Okay, so to go to the solenoid one that we just looked at, go to the technical guide, go to control loop accessories, and go to solenoids. And then if we scroll down here, this is where we have the configuration of the type of solenoids that we just looked at and what the different positions mean.